If your pastor, guru, or spiritual mentor told you that disagreeing with them was the same as disobeying God, would you notice the red flag? Spiritual authority abuse rarely starts with obvious extremes. It begins quietly, a leader you respect asking for just a little more trust, a community where questions feel awkward, a sermon that leaves you feeling smaller instead of stronger. You may sense something's wrong, but you don't have language for it. In this video, we're unpacking the early warning signs of spiritual authority abuse before it escalates into full-blown control, isolation, or collapse of your faith. We'll look at subtle behaviors, common tactics, and emotional patterns that show up in churches, ministries, and spiritual communities across traditions. If you've ever felt uneasy under a leader who speaks for God, stay with me. By the end, you'll have practical tools to recognize unhealthy power dynamics, and more importantly, permission to trust your own discernment again. Spiritual leaders can play a beautiful role in our lives, guiding, comforting, challenging us to grow. But when that influence twists into control, guilt, and fear, it becomes spiritual authority abuse, and it can quietly erode your mental health, relationships, and connection with the divine. In this video, we'll explore how to spot early warning signs. Before things become extreme, we're not here to attack faith or any particular religion. We're here to protect your spiritual freedom and help you name what your body and heart might already be sensing. We'll move through 11 specific warning signs, how they show up, why they're dangerous, and what healthier alternatives look like. If you've been confused, doubting yourself, or wondering, is it me, or is this actually unhealthy? This is for you. If you care about spiritual health and emotional safety, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future deep dives like this, and stay with me until the end for key takeaways and next steps. The first big warning sign: the leader gradually equates loyalty to them with loyalty to God, truth, or the path. It sounds like, if you really trusted God, you'd trust my leadership, or those who leave this ministry are stepping out of God's will. Doubt or disagreement gets framed as rebellion or spiritual immaturity. On the surface, it may look like unity, covering, or honor. Inside, you feel pressure. If I pull back from this leader, am I betraying God? Over time, your conscience gets reprogrammed. Instead of asking, is this right, loving, and wise, you ask, will they approve of this? Healthy leaders constantly separate themselves from God in your mind. They say, test everything. Don't take my word for it. Listen to your conscience. Unhealthy leaders blur that line. If a leader makes their voice the main channel of God, that's not devotion. It's a subtle power grab. Another early warning sign: questions are tolerated at best, punished at worst. Maybe no one outright says, don't ask that. Instead, you're labeled critical, rebellious, or lacking faith when you want clarification. The room goes quiet when someone raises a tough issue. Leaders respond with vague spiritual cliches instead of real answers. You might hear, just trust the process. You're overthinking it. Or, we don't entertain that kind of doubt here. Over time, people stop asking anything at all. A culture of intellectual laziness and spiritual fear forms, disguised as childlike faith. Healthy communities welcome honest questions. They may not have all the answers, but they create space for wrestle and nuance. Unhealthy ones protect the system and the leader's image at any cost. If you feel a knot in your stomach every time you consider asking something real, your body may already recognize what your mind is still explaining away. Sign 3. Love and acceptance become conditional, quietly tied to obedience, performance, or visibility. At first, you feel incredibly seen. The leader remembers your name, praises your zeal, invites you into inner circles. But when you set a boundary, question something, or simply burn out, the warmth cools. You're not overtly shunned, but invitations stop, eye contact fades, you're less chosen. The message underneath: you're valuable here as long as you play the game. You might find yourself working harder to regain approval, extra volunteering, more tithing, exaggerated displays of submission. This is behavioral conditioning, spiritualized. Healthy leaders communicate. You're loved and welcome whether you're on the platform or sitting in the back. Your yes and your no are both honored. You can disagree or step back without losing belonging. If love feels like a reward for compliance instead of a steady baseline, that's not spiritual maturity. That's manipulation wearing a holy mask. A fourth warning sign is when boundaries are minimized or spiritualized away. Leaders might push for access to your time, money, emotions, or even private life in ways that feel intrusive. When you hesitate, they quote scripture or spiritual principles to override your instincts. Die to yourself. Don't withhold from God. Real disciples don't say no. Suddenly, healthy boundaries, rest, privacy, financial responsibility, emotional autonomy are framed as selfishness or spiritual weakness. You may feel guilty for wanting a day off, spending evenings with family, or protecting your mental health. In a healthy community, boundaries are seen as wisdom, not rebellion. Leaders model saying no themselves. They respect your limits, finances, and personal journey, even when it doesn't benefit the organization. If every attempt to set a boundary is met with pressure, spiritual quotes, or subtle shame, you're not in a devoted environment. You're in a system that prioritizes its needs over your well-being. Another classic sign, fear-based motivation, becomes the primary driver. Instead of being drawn by love, truth, or growth, you find yourself moved mainly by anxiety, fear of punishment, exclusion, or spiritual disaster if you don't comply. Messages may emphasize catastrophe. Leave this group and your life will fall apart. Question the leader and your family will be cursed. Skip a meeting and you're opening doors to darkness. Sometimes it's spoken plainly. Often it's implied through stories and testimonies. Your spiritual life becomes hypervigilant. You're constantly scanning. Did I do enough? Did I offend the leader? Did I give properly? Is God mad at me because they are? Healthy spiritual spaces acknowledge consequences but anchor you in love, freedom, and personal responsibility. They don't hold your destiny hostage to your loyalty. If your faith practice mostly feels like walking on eggshells around authority figures, that's not reverence, that's spiritualized fear conditioning. Warning sign 6. The leader or group begins controlling your relationships and information. You might hear subtle cautions like, be careful with those people, they're not on our spiritual level, or that author is dangerous, only read what we recommend. Over time, your world shrinks. Friends who leave the group become backslidden, rebellious, or deceived. You're discouraged from spending time with family who don't share the same beliefs, or from consuming media outside approved channels. This isolation doesn't always look extreme. It can sound like concern for your spiritual health, but the effect is the same. Your reality gets curated by those in power, making it harder to imagine life outside the system. Healthy spiritual communities trust that truth can withstand comparison. They don't panic when you read widely, maintain diverse friendships, or think for yourself. When a leader starts deciding who you're allowed to trust, that's not protection, it's control. Sign 7. Gaslighting dressed up as spiritual insight. Gaslighting happens when someone persistently makes you doubt your own perception, memory, or sanity. In spiritual contexts, it can sound like you're being too sensitive, that never happened the way you remember, or the devil is confusing you. You bring a concern, maybe about a hurtful comment, a broken promise, or contradictory teaching. Instead of being heard, you're told your discernment is off, your heart is hard, or your emotions are untrustworthy. Over time, you second-guess everything. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe that wasn't controlling. Maybe I'm the problem. Healthy leaders may disagree with your perspective, but they don't erase. your reality. They listen, reflect, and are open to correction themselves. If every attempt to name your experience ends with you apologizing for having it, you're not being discipled, you're being destabilized so someone else's version of truth can reign unchecked. Another red flag? Financial and service demands that ignore transparency, consent, and capacity. It might start with a heavy emphasis on giving. If you really trust God, you'll sow sacrificially into this ministry. People are praised publicly for dramatic donations, while those who can't give as much feel quietly ashamed. You may be urged to volunteer constantly, multiple services, events, and extra projects, with little regard for your work schedule, health, or family responsibilities. When you ask where the money goes or suggest rotating volunteers, you're met with defensiveness. Don't you trust leadership? God sees your sacrifice. Healthy organizations practice clear accounting, realistic expectations, and consent-based service. They honor seasons of rest and never imply that your worth or God's favor depends on how much you give. If your wallet, free time, and energy are treated as community property and questions about it feel forbidden, that's exploitation wearing a spiritual badge. Sign 9. The leader is unaccountable and above correction. Pay attention to what happens when they're confronted. Do they welcome oversight, or do they quickly label critics as bitter, divisive, or under spiritual attack? Unhealthy leaders often surround themselves with loyalists rather than true peers. Boards and elders may exist in name only, rubber-stamping decisions. Serious concerns are handled privately, quietly, or not at all, especially if they threaten the leader's image. You might hear things like, "Touch not the Lord's anointed," used to shut down legitimate scrutiny. Repentance, when it happens, is vague and performative. Emotional apologies without concrete change or shared power. Healthy leaders invite evaluation, publish clear accountability structures, and accept that they're human, not untouchable. They step down when necessary. If every pathway for feedback eventually loops back to the same person, with no real recourse, you're not in a community, you're in a personality-centered system. Warning sign 10, your inner life is colonized. Spiritual language is used to override your conscience, intuition, and emotions. You may be told, "Don't trust your heart, it's deceitful," or "Your feelings are lying, listen to your leaders instead." Any discomfort or resistance you feel is framed purely as spiritual warfare or fleshly rebellion. Over time, you lose connection with your own sense of right and wrong. You stop noticing that your body tenses when someone crosses a line, or that you feel grief when you witness injustice. Healthy spirituality integrates conscience, emotion, and intuition with sacred texts and community wisdom. A good leader helps you listen to your inner signals, not bulldoze them. If the message is, "Ignore what you feel, only we can interpret God for you," the goal isn't your maturity, it's dependency, and dependency is fertile soil for abuse of every kind. Sign 11, and a major composite red flag. The community's health is sacrificed to protect the leader or brand. When scandals, moral failures, or consistent harm emerge, what happens? Is the first instinct to care for the wounded, or to manage optics, silence rumors, and keep the machine running? You might see survivors discouraged from going public for the sake of the gospel, staff pressured to sign NDAs, or members told to move on without real investigation or restitution. Spiritual language gets weaponized. Forgiveness is demanded without accountability. Unity is prioritized over truth, and any attempt to seek justice is framed as bitterness. Healthy communities see truth as aligned with the sacred, not a threat to it. They cooperate with outside investigations, empower survivors, and accept the cost of honesty. If the greatest sin in your group is making the leader look bad, your safety and the safety of others is not the priority, and that's a clear sign to step back. Let's bring this together with some key takeaways. Spiritual authority abuse rarely looks monstrous at first. It often begins with a leader subtly equating loyalty to them with loyalty to God or truth. Questions, boundaries, and diverse relationships quietly discouraged. Love, belonging, and opportunity made conditional on compliance. Fear, gaslighting, and spiritual slogans used to override your inner signals. Money, time, and loyalty demanded without transparency or real accountability. Healthy spiritual spaces aren't perfect, but they consistently welcome questions and doubt as part of growth. Honor your boundaries, relationships, and conscience. Separate God from any one leader or institution. Practice transparency, shared power, and real consequences for harm. If some of these warning signs feel familiar, you're not crazy and you're not alone. Recognizing patterns is the first act of reclaiming your spiritual freedom and your right to seek the sacred without control or fear. If this video put words to things you felt but couldn't name, let it affirm this: your questions, boundaries, and instincts matter. You are not disloyal or less spiritual for wanting safety, honesty, and freedom. If you suspect you're in an unhealthy spiritual environment, consider small, practical steps. Confide in a trusted, outside friend or therapist. Read broadly from diverse perspectives. Take temporary distance from high-pressure activities and notice how your body responds. You do not have to stay where you are harmed to prove your faith. If you found this helpful, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming videos on healing religious trauma, rebuilding spirituality, and navigating healthy communities. Share this with someone who might need language for what they're going through. In the comments, you're welcome to share, anonymously if needed, one pattern you've witnessed and what you wish you'd recognized sooner. Your story could be the early warning someone else urgently needs.